So welcome to a little bit of a N-scale diversion here at Newcastle Central. We go back almost a year or so ago. I had posted a video about doing some work in N-scale and some T-Trak modules that I was building. I'll put a link up in the top corner of the video right now. And T-Trak is basically a modular standard for N-gauge trains. The idea is that it's essentially tabletop standard, for want of a better word. Everyone can build these modules. They're all conforming to the same size and dimensions, track spacing, things like that. And you can kind of go nuts as to how you want it to be. So this is one of the modules that I have built up. I'm going to move back a little bit so you can take it in. So this is the one that I had showed in the video that I was first building up. I was laying down the track, and I hadn't got a very good reception from that. A lot of people had said, hey, just stick to double O gauge, stick to Newcastle Central. That is still the main focus of the channel. Here's Newcastle Central hanging out now. Hasn't been an awful lot of progress in the last few weeks, which is kind of why I'm doing this, because I've been doing some work here on the N-scale modules. I've also got another module that's built, although I have more work to do around here for where the freight yard would be. And then I've got another module here where I've started then building up a bridge and for what will be a river, and I've got some scenery I'm going to raise on the back there and make a little bit of a hill. But I wanted to kind of come in and show a little bit about this, because people have asked about American trains. I am based in the US, even though I grew up around Durham, and Newcastle Central is still what I would kind of call my home station, but I do really like American trains as well. So I wanted to have a little video just to kind of go into some of this. If this isn't your thing, if you just want to focus on Newcastle Central and the double O gauge stuff, that's fine. Just skip this video. But I might throw in a few more videos now that I've got a little bit more progress made here on some of this N-gauge stuff. And honestly, it's just kind of fun to run. It's something a little bit different. It's something just that little bit of variety to kind of keep you going when you get stuck into a little bit of a rut. So let's have a look around here, and we'll see what you think. I guess I am a little bit under the weather here as well, so I apologize if I sound a little odd. I suppose it is the season for cold and bugs and stuff like that. My oldest started school in September, and my youngest is at preschool, so basically it's just getting passed back and forth around the house. But anyway, I wanted to kind of start out by showing the difference in scales. So this is double O gauge. This is class 47, 47001. That's what most people from the channel probably is pretty familiar with. So double O gauge, is 1/76 scale. If you compare this to an HO loco, like this BNSF, which stands for Burlington Northern and Santa Fe, this is HO gauge. This is 1/87th scale. So they run on the same gauge track. The track is the same width, and so I actually do run the HO locos on the same tracks as I do for Newcastle Central. That's kind of why I was building up Newcastle Central the way I was, and that I can still run HO gauge locos. I can switch the layout over to DC. Most of the American stuff that I have is actually DC. I pick it up fairly cheap, or when people are giving stuff away. So this is actually a DCC loco. Most of my other HO gauge stuff isn't. That's still a DC. But because this is 1/76 scale, these locos are a little bit bigger in size than the HO gauge ones are. We then step down to N-scale. This is an N-scale loco, and this is 1/160th. Now, for the models that are in the UK, which is probably going to be the bulk of the people watching the channel, N-scale in the UK is 1/148th. This is 1/160th. So again, kind of like the difference between double O gauge on the left and the HO gauge on the right, where the British double O gauge is a little bit larger of a loco, even though the track gauge is the same. You've got the same when it comes to N gauge. Track gauge is the same, but the British N gauge will be 1/148th scale, so those locos will appear a little bit larger than the US 1/160th scale. I don't think it's just the US. I think UK, again, is pretty much the only one that does both the double O at 1/176th and then does N at 1/48th. I could be wrong. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting to see kind of the size difference between the three locos. So most of the time, if we kind of move this BNSF unit out the way and move over the N gauge loco, try and translate, if you're mainly a double O gauge modeler, try and translate what you're seeing in the video down to something where the locos are that size, and hopefully you'll get a little bit more of a sense of some of the challenges of N-gauge modeling. It is quite different. It's also why I enjoy it. You can fit a lot more into a small space, but it does make it a lot more difficult when it comes to modeling compared to double O gauge. So let's have a little bit of a look around some of these T-Trak modules and see some trends moving around too. Let's start out by having a little bit of a look at the trends. I've only got 3 N-gauge locos, but for the size of the little T-Trak layout that I have, I think this is probably good enough. So this is a little Alco switcher unit. So this would be used to switch cars around in a yard, or fret, stuff like that. This is a little RSC2 unit. Picked this up at a show earlier in the year. Put in DCC chip, and it runs okay. It's not too good at low speed. I probably need to go in and clean the wheels and clean the drivetrain out a little bit. But that's a fun little unit. It's probably a little bit older. Most of what I'm trying to do on this N-Trak layout is probably more what you would call modern image. More modern locos, just because that's kind of what I enjoy, that's kind of what I see, and it's a little bit different than what I'm doing on Newcastle Central. But I'm not limiting myself to that at all. It's just more the buildings and the vehicles and accessories and stuff like that are probably more of a modern image. But there is one loco that I'll show you where it is definitely not modern at all. This is my little switch unit. We then step over and look at 5475. 5475 is an ES44 AC, and all 3 of these locos are built by Cardo. This is a 44 AC. I really like this one. This came with DCC already fitted. This is a pretty smooth runner. This is, one of the main workhorses that I have on the layout that will pull around the freight cars. So that one, and then 8512. 8512 is an SD70 SE. This was the first one that I got. And again, that's kind of one of the solid workforces that you would see out for real on the railways over here in the US moving around. All 3 of these are they're pretty well detailed. Again, we're looking at something, in N-gauge 1/160th scale. So total length of these is about 5 inches. So there's an awful lot of detail to them. In time, I probably will weather these as well. That's the only kind of downside that I find with these, that they are very well detailed, but then they also look too new and shiny. And actually, one of the reasons why I kind of picked Union Pacific and BNSF are the same is that, for the most part, locos are fairly well maintained. They are kept fairly clean, but what you would find is the handrails here should be painted in white. In the grills, you should probably have a black wash that would just kind of darken that down. And then along the bottom on the bogies and on the fuel tanks on the bottom there, you probably get a little bit of a dust kind of color that would build up on that. But at least for now, these are the 3 main locos that I'll run around on the layout. So now you got a little bit of an idea as to what. So this is the first T-Trak module that I was building. This is one that I kind of shown way back when I was first building it up. And really, this module is meant to be kind of a diesel maintenance facility, and some kind of warehouse for maintenance of wear, stuff like that. So basically, this would be a Union Pacific depot where the trains would come in for repairs, for refueling, whatever else. But they would also then park up some of the maintenance vehicles if they're going out and doing track repairs. So I kind of need to replace the 12-volt battery that drives this. It's a little bit dark inside there. You can't really see it all that great. But there is a ton of detail in there. There's inspection bays, and there's a platform. There's some men working in there, some tool chests and stuff like that. Added in signs as well. On the outside, there's some more signs, spools of cable. Add in detailing vents and stuff on the top. Also then got a refueling point in here. So this is actually what the refueling points look like in the US. They are a little bit different than what I've seen in the UK. These are fairly common refueling points over here. So it gives some kind of idea of the size of those with a little man that's standing there. So it gives me some amount of interest because I can move, move locos in and out of one of these 2 inspection bays. If they go in and do some work, then they can come out. They can come in and refuel. And then we've got kind of a little refueling station down here. So that's one of the Micro Trends. Is a fairly big manufacturer of freight cars and stuff. So this is a Micro Trends, more on a car, just an oil car, parked up in there, kind of simulate that. Okay, you've got a delivery of fuel. So you'll be coming in, you'll be putting it in those fuel storage tanks. A little man standing there supervising everything that's going on. And then from there, that would feed that refueling point. So, because it's N-scale, kind of cramped in space on T-Trak, so this is fairly common where that I've done it. You got a little bit of a run around here, so you can park up 2 or 3 cars, and that's where my switch is parked up right now. And then back here is where you've then you know, kind of got the maintenance of warehouse. So you've got one of the little vehicles hanging out over here that could climb up on the tracks and could drive itself along, and you got deliveries coming in here, the forklift driver, one guy coming out, maybe he's behind his brake or something like that. I think he's carrying a little box of tools or something like that. And again, you can't really see, but if I had a new 9-volt battery, which I couldn't find before I started recording, there are lights inside of here as well. There isn't any details inside of it, but it does light up, and it looks kind of cool. And then the caboose. Every train should have a caboose, I guess. In the US, this is what would sit on the end of the train. They're not used in modern times at all. They haven't been for decades. But I found that again at a train show, and I thought that was kind of cool. It needs weathering up, but it kind of serves as a little bit of a historical point, I guess. If this was going to be a Union Pacific maintenance depot, you know, I figured, okay, so let's put this in, and then you would have at least something going on to remind people of times gone by. This is this first module that I've been building. I'm quite happy with how it works. It's been at 2 or 3 different shows now, and it gets a lot of interest again because of the detailing inside of that maintenance shed, and you know, some of the refueling points you can do. You can bring trains in, you can drop off some wagons, back them up, go and do some maintenance, come in, get fueling, come in, and you know, pick up some more wagons. So this is one of my favorite modules, not just because it's the only one that I've built, at least to mostly completion, but it's something that I don't have on Newcastle Central, this kind of operational side of things. So this one's kind of fun. Guys, this is kind of moving along a little bit further down the T-Trak module layout that I have. And I guess if I take a step back to get an idea as to what I have here, this is all sitting on a shelf above Newcastle Central, what would be the tiny yard. So there's a whole, you can see all the mess that you don't normally get to see in the videos. That will be the tiny yard eventually, but I've just then built a shelf on top, and these are then the modules themselves. So they all then disconnect right here and down here. So this is how the modules are connected together. The tracks just clip together, and then you can move them away. So this is the second module that I've been working on. This is again going to be a little bit more of just kind of an intermodal yard and freight station. So this is some of the intermodal stuff that's kind of parked up there. So that's enough for you know, a pretty large set of cars. I do have a crane as well. I'll be able to lift those off. I'm just not super duper happy with it. I'm not quite sure how it's going to go. And I did realize that I would need to take up some of this greenery here as well. The idea is that the crane would sit over the top and could move up and down like that. It can then pick one of those up, move them over. I do have another truck terminal as well. I haven't gone ahead and built this up. Probably going to cut it in half so it becomes almost like a low relief. So have all of the front, but probably like around there, then cut it in half and just have half of the roof, and then that would kind of sit along the back there. So it should come out to something like that. That would then give plenty of room for trucks to still back up and still have movement up and down for the trucks to drive around, but excuse me, at least have a little bit more interest here. And this is this is the Cardo unit here of freight cars. I think they're all 40-inch containers. They are all actually red. I've then gone out and bought some different ones like Maersk, Sea Lion, Costco, Hanjin, just to make it look a little bit different. These are really nice units. They're really nice freight cars. They're a little bit of a pain to get all the wheels clipped together, and they're a little bit fragile going over points sometimes, but once you get them connected up right, then they run really well and they look really good too. And then kind of pivoting over here, this is again just some kind of industry. I'm not entirely sure what this would be. I'm not quite sure what I was going for here, but I found this really cool little warehouse building that can open up, and so you'll be able to take one of the cars right inside of it. So there's no detailing inside yet, because again I haven't quite figured out what this would be. The track just kind of runs through. And then you could have, you know, some kind of box truck or a van can pull up into here, and you could move them all the way in. So these are just a couple of hopper cars from Atlas. So it's a little bit of a mix. You know, this Atlas is one of the manufacturers. Kato is then one of the manufacturers, both of locomotives and of Fred cars. And then that oil tanker was by Microtrends. They're probably the three main ones. Bachmann do some stuff as well. I haven't got a lot of Bachmann experience in Engage. Most people that I know in the local clubs kind of stick with Atlas, Microtrends, or Kato. But again, I've added in some of the vent detailing as well. You know, some of the downspouts that will come through, and that'll get painted up and weathered a little bit, very much like this one would do. Put some lights inside as well once I figure out what will be going on. Put some interior detailing pieces. It's actually a very, very similar kind of track layout. So with T-Trak, you have your two main lines that run through like this. You then cut off, and you got a little bit of a run around, a little bit of a fret siding here, and then that'll then point off to then take you up to that intermodal yard, and then you can back up into the warehouse. And again, I like this. This has actually worked out pretty good with that little Alco RSC2 switcher that I have. You know, kind of what I would typically do in an operating session, which might be what I try and show a video clip of, is move something like the ES44 or the 70 SE, move that onto the main line, then use the switcher to go and pull in those intermodal container cars, pull in the hopper cars, pull in the oil car, and then off it can go. And again, at the moment, I just don't have that kind of fret operation that I can do on Newcastle Central. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, Newcastle Central was very much meant to be passenger trains and just kind of watching trains run around and around. This I wanted a little bit more of operational interest. So this does also have a crossover piece on tracks as well. And the idea there is just, again, because it's, you know, that T-Trak approach, need to have somewhere to switch locos from one main line to the other if I want to. Probably won't get used a lot. For the most times when we're at train shows, we just have one train running in either direction. Sometimes we'll have two on the same line. So you don't normally switch them over, but I wanted to add it in there just that I had that option. The idea being that I could have something running around on fret over here, and it's like, okay, I now want to start moving that into the yard, so I could then switch it over, and I could bring this on the inside line to outside and just let that loop around a whole bunch with whatever fret it's pulling. So again, it was all just kind of future-proofing for operational interest. And this becomes really fun when you put the two of them together. You've then got this intermodal yard and fret warehouse, and then coming over into the diesel maintenance facility, refueling facility, and stuff like that. You know, this is a pretty fun 15-20 minutes of operating to move locos around into maintenance, into refueling, get the cars then lined up and ready to go, and then pull away. So this is another fun module. A little bit more work to do on this one, a little bit more detailing pieces, but I can see a lot of promise left in this one. This is then the last of the T-Trak modules that I'll probably be working on from a scenic perspective. I've kind of carved out what would be the riverbed, and this top part of the bridge does lift off as well. And I'm not sure if I would leave it like that or if I would put it back on. I'm not sure. I would want to respray this and weather it. I'm not sold on the color of that, but again, it's something a little bit fun. And then river. So all I had done there was just cut out the wood. There's then foam underneath that's being carved, and then put plaster over it and kind of smooth it down. So the next step is going to be actually figuring out, you know, doing the edges of the riverbank and actually getting the water in place and stuff like that, using some of the Woodland Scenic products. I've kind of been holding off on doing that. I'm wanting to do practice on a little bit of a smaller scale before I try it on this. So this module isn't really going to have a whole lot. There's not going to be any buildings on this. There won't be too much more detailing pieces to go. It's really going to be, you know, the focal point is meant to be the river, and just to give a little bit of a different scenic variety here. So it's still kind of fun. I may well build up, I think I said earlier, build up a little bit of a hill here, and maybe there's a little bit around here, just so you could get the idea that it would start to slope away and start to get some trees and bushes in. The idea being that, you know, you've moved from kind of your fairly developed and industrialized part, and now you're kind of moving a little bit further away, and you're moving a little bit more the countryside almost. These are then end caps, so they're just 180 just to swing the track around. I don't have an awful lot of interest in doing scenic work on these right away. I want to focus on these two modules and a little bit more on that last module, but these will probably end up having hills developed on them and probably a tunnel. And so the idea is that I would like to have it go into a tunnel, and then once I've got the skyboard on this one, you know, those other two have skyboards. Once I have a skyboard on this one, the idea is that the trains would come around the corner, go through a tunnel, and that's it. You wouldn't see them until they would come all the way out the other end cap that we have over there, and I might do functionally something similar, you know, bring them out of a tunnel, something like that. So this one has some amount of work to do. It's functional, the trains run over it just fine, it just doesn't look super duper pretty. So this then is kind of the pride and joy of my collection. This is the Milwaukee Road Olympian Hiawatha. I'm going to have to go for a little bit of a walk here, because this thing has 9 passenger cars in total. And then we'll kind of step back and you can kind of see it all in its glory. So, Milwaukee Road, or for its full name, the Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul and Pacific Railroad, was a railroad that started up mid 1800s around the Chicago and Milwaukee area. They did kind of spread around the Midwest of the U.S. down into Omaha, Kansas City. They'd move up into Sioux Falls as well. But they then expanded west, as a lot of railroads did. So Great Northern and Northern Pacific were two of the major U.S. railroads that all kind of started around that same area, around Chicago and Minneapolis, St. Paul area. And they all expanded west, you know, 1870s, 1880s, 1890s. So the Milwaukee had what they called the Hiawathas, and the Hiawathas were their kind of high-speed, luxurious trains. And so mid-1930s they came out with the Hiawathas, and they were steam-driven at the time. And then in the mid to late 1940s, early 1950s, they then switched over to diesel, again like a lot of the railroads did at the time. And so that kind of flagship car then became this Olympian Hiawatha, on the Pacific Road anyway. They had other Hiawathas that were named as well. They had you know, Morning Sunrise, I think, and stuff like that. So this was the Olympian. Olympian as in the Olympic mountains that you would come over to. So this is the lounge observation car at the back of the train. This is kind of its, you know, defining focal point. That really made it stand out. You know, people could sit and they've got pretty good views come through. And you have a couple of different sleeper cars as well. Another sleeper car. Now you're kind of coming into the diner, and so again, one of the things that the Milwaukee was kind of famed for was their dining services. It really was a no expense spared kind of thing. And this was at the time when jetliners, the airlines, were kind of coming much more into power. People weren't looking at trains for long distance travel anymore. And, you know, again, we're looking at something where it's, you know, 1,800 miles, 2,000 miles from Chicago out to the Pacific Northwest, here where I am in Seattle. You know, this would take 45 hours. And so planes could, you know, cut that down to 3 and 4 hours, 5 hours. So they really had to kind of, you know, do something a little bit different. And so dining was one of the main things that the Milwaukee Road did. So I've got plans to put some detailing pieces in there on the tables. Some flowers, some plates, cutlery, things like this. This is then another centerpiece of the Milwaukee Road. Not necessarily just the Milwaukee Road, but I believe that Milwaukee Road were the first that brought out these superdomes. Great Northern and Northern Pacific both had their own passenger routes. Great Northern had the Empire Builder, and Northern Pacific then had North Coast Limited. They were the names of the high-quality passenger trains that they ran. So the Milwaukee Road, though, I think were the first that brought out a superdome. And again, the idea is that the passengers up top there, as they're coming through all the stunning mountain scenery that you would get through Montana, Wyoming, and into Washington, you know, they'll be able to sit up there and they've got some pretty decent views. And then there's just a couple more coaches where people would just be sitting, coming into baggage as well, where all the bags would get loaded up, and then 2 units on the front. These are EMD F7PA and then an F7B. This B unit basically is a steam generator, so it could drive heating. Will be a diesel unit. I think it's about 4,000 horsepower each, 3.5 to 4,000 horsepower from each of these locos lashed together. You would often have a second FP7A as well, so you'd have an A, B, A. Excuse me. That was a fairly common running order of these, depending on whereabouts they were and how much wet they were carrying and what have you. So this is then, again, that in all of its glory. This is a wonderful train to run. I just got this pretty recently for my birthday, and I've gone through it and added in the coach lighting. I don't know how well it comes across on the camera, but there are lighting strips inside each of these passenger coaches, just to give a little bit more interest. And again, same as like with that dining car, I'm wanting to put passengers in here. I would really like to get the Great Northern Empire Builder and that Northern Pacific North Coast Limited. They never really released the North Coast Limited. None of the manufacturers have really put together an entire set like this from Cardo. There was an Empire Builder from Great Northern, but it's very, very hard to find and pretty expensive, so I'm not really expecting to get one unless they do a re-release with more modern tooling. And the same with Northern Pacific. There wasn't really one complete set of passenger coaches that were ever released, so we'll see. Hopefully Cardo will come out with a release pretty soon, but this is fun. It really doesn't fit in at all with kind of the modern image. It also really does not fit in at all with the Union Pacific. They were somewhat competitors, but also somewhat partners, actually, so I guess maybe it does. This pen scheme would have been from early 50s, mid-50s, when the Olympian Hiawatha would have been running out here. But yeah, Milwaukee did actually partner with Union Pacific. I think the city of Portland was one of the Union Pacific trains that would run out to the city of Portland, funnily enough. But the Milwaukee did repaint a number of their trains and passenger cars in more the Union Pacific yellow, mid to late 1950s and early 60s, I believe. So it's possible. So I treat this as modeler's discretion, modeler's artistic license, and it's just a damn fun train to run as well. Somewhat interesting to watch. I know the lighting also isn't kind of great. The train shed is set up for Newcastle Central over here, and so this is very well illuminated. Not quite so much over here on the shelf. So maybe if I'm going to do some more videos over here, then I'll try and figure out a little bit better lighting. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. Like I said, a little bit of a diversion, but also hopefully explains a little bit about why there's sometimes not a lot of progress on Newcastle Central itself. You know, I've got 2 young kids and other projects going on with work and whatever, so that takes up some of my time, but this also takes up time as well. I am in an N-scale train club up here, and so we go off and do 3 or 4 shows over the winter time, which is kind of why I've been working on this lately, as opposed to Newcastle Central, because I will be taking these off to train shows November and then January and then February, so I'm wanting to try and get all 3 of these modules completed. This one is mostly done. I've got a few other pieces I want to add in, but I really want to work on this one here for the intermodal yard, and then that Scenic one down there with the river. So yeah, I hope you've been enjoying this. Like I said, something a little bit different, and maybe I'll try and get a video up of the HO trends as well. I've got a few different trends there. I've got BNSF, I've got some Union Pacific, I've got also something else that kind of like the Milwaukee Road trend is kind of one of my favorite pieces of the HO stuff. So if you've been enjoying this, if you've liked this little bit diversion and checking out something different with the American locos, let me know. You know, and hopefully I'll come back and do an HO US loco video pretty soon. Subscribe and follow along if that's what you want to see, or if you're, curious as to what Newcastle Central is. I know that this video might be attracting people when they've seen a Union Pacific N-gauge, and all of a sudden they're seeing something very different over here. So this is Newcastle Central. This is the main focus of what this channel should actually be when I'm not procrastinating or when I'm not distracted and working on this N-gauge stuff. Newcastle Central is a large passenger station that will be up in the northeast of England. So it's mainly focused on passenger operations at the moment, but I am hopefully going to be building up freight yard pretty soon. So got a couple of freight here, class 37 that's pulling coal trains, got a class 47 that's then parked up, got some diesel multiple units on the back here, and then a fairly short rake of class 43 HSTs, because Hornby and then Infinite Wisdom still have not actually released all the wreck of those new coaches, but there's other stuff in there as well. So yeah, subscribe and follow along. See what you think of Newcastle Central. Let me know what you think about this American stuff as well. And I can certainly come back and show some progress on these T-Trak modules as I move along. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.